This build here is all under $1,000. All the links will be down in the video's description if you guys want to go and purchase any of these parts. So we got the Enthoo Pro full ATX computer case, an EVGA 700 watt bronze power supply, Asus Z97 Pro Gamer Edition motherboard, an Intel Core i5 processor. We didn't go with the i7 because it's overkill. Thermal MX4 compound here, which will be used for the processor for cooling. 16 gigabytes of RAM, an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 960 by MSI here for the graphics card. Here we have a 1 terabyte 7200 RPM hard drive, and here we have a multi-card reader, so it can read SD cards, CF cards. It also has 4 USB 2.0 ports, 2 USB 3.0 ports, and an eSATA port. And again, this is just because the computer is going to be used for transferring pictures back and forth constantly. Open up all these boxes here and get started putting this whole computer together. Here, there's a box for the power supply. Here we have user manual, screw set for hard drives and that kind of stuff, zip ties for cable management, RMA request, and an extra plate. I'm not sure what the plate's for, but I'm sure we'll figure it out if we read the manual, but who does that? With most computer cases, nowadays anyways, you're able to take the back panel off, and that is where we need to put all the standoffs and all that stuff. So if you flip this over to the other side, we should be able to remove this panel as well. So you can plug in a 12 volt SATA port here and use it to power your fans. Alright, so now that we have the case out, we'll go ahead and take out the motherboard so we can line up the board with the case and make sure the standoffs are in their proper spots. When handling a motherboard, you're supposed to have an anti-static wrist strap. However, throughout the 10 years or so that I've been building computers, I've never used one and I've never had a problem, so long as before I touch the motherboard, I touch something metal and ground myself. If you don't do this, then you might send a shock through the motherboard and completely fry it. So keep that in mind before you touch the motherboard. Let me show you here the motherboard. So here is where the processor goes. This is where the RAM sticks go. This is where the graphics cards go. And this is where additional cards get plugged into on the bottom. Typically your motherboards will come with a board that goes on the back of the case. So keep that in mind. We usually also have a user guide which will help you with setting up custom settings on the BIOS. So keep this as well. It might also include a CD so you can upgrade the BIOS if needed. Your boards will also come with extra cables. So here they've given us 4 SATA cables, 2 with a right angle and the other 2 are just straight. And this here is for SLI technology. So if you get 2 video cards, you can use this little connector here to connect your 2 video cards and then basically use them as just 1 card instead. Typically you would have these standoffs and they wouldn't be on the case just yet. Typically you would find them in your case like this, and you do have a couple of extra ones here in the case. Thankfully, the people that designed this case pretty much already put the standoffs in the correct area. So you can see those little metal standoffs there, and those are all already in the perfectly right spot. If you put the motherboard down, as you can see here, it'll line up with all those standoffs just right. So there you can see the standoff lining up. That saves us an extra step. But before you put the motherboard in place, take this out, and we need to put this in place first. So to put this in, you simply take it out of the box and you just snap it in place here. Once that's in, it should look something like this. So there you can see the ports. So as always, before you touch the board, remember to ground yourself and touch metal so that you don't spark anything on the board. And then grab the board. I suggest using the heat sinks here to grab it. That way there's even less of a chance of breaking it. And then you just simply slide it back here and line it up with the standoffs. Right, so here, make sure to check the manual and check which screws you're actually supposed to be using when you do this, just so you don't use the wrong screws and end up causing problems to the board or to the standoffs and the case. So basically just get all these screws in place here on the motherboard to secure it. Alright, now that we have that done, we should be able to go ahead and set in the power supply. So we'll do that now, and that will go in this box here. So your typical power supply comes with your manual power supply box and wire harness here. And this here will sit like this with the fan going out. Alright, next here you need to take out these screws here along the bottom on this case, so we can remove that little metal case where the power supply goes in. And then turn the case around like this, and this should now be loose, and you should be able to lift this up and out of here. So there's that case, and then the power supply simply goes back here. So get that screwed in with the screws that came with the case, and they should be labeled as power supply screws. Make sure you use the right ones, otherwise you may end up damaging the components here. And there we go. So there's the power supply in place. Now we need to route all these cables here through this hole, so we can have all the cables on the back of the computer, and that way they don't get in the way of anything else. So get this mess of cables here and just push all of them through this hole and out to the other side. Now that we've done that, we can go ahead and put this metal piece back in place here. And that just simply slides in place there. Alright, so next we'll probably want to put the processor in place. So get your processor here and go ahead and open it up. You may want to keep the box if you're doing this build, because if you don't have the box, you can't send the processor back. And this processor here does come with a heatsink, so you don't have to worry about buying an extra heatsink unless you need more cooling. And there is the processor. Be very careful with that. It has gold pins on the back, or it has these gold connectors on the back, so be very careful with that. The way you get this in place is you unlatch this, and this will take this off, this metal bracket. Now get your processor here, and again ground yourself before you do anything, and you need to make sure you line it up properly as well. There should be a little notch right here that you need to line it up with, and the processor should just drop in place. You shouldn't have to force anything, and then you simply put this bracket back in place here. And as you're putting this back in, this plate will come out, and keep this plate, because if you don't have this plate, you can't send your motherboard back if it breaks or has any issues. So keep this with your motherboard in case you have issues. These new heat sinks typically come with paste already on them, so you shouldn't have to worry about the extra thermal paste, but I don't like to use this paste, so I'm gonna go ahead and rub this off and use the Arctic MX4. So simply put a small bead right in the center of the processor, and when you put the heatsink on, it will squish down that paste and it should equal out on the sides. So the way you put this in is you get these screws here and you line them up and you push them in, and then you twist them in place. They should click in. Then connect this connector to the CPU fan connector on the motherboard. Alright, next we'll go ahead and put the RAM sticks in. So this is just ballistics RAM. It's probably the cheapest RAM, but any RAM nowadays is pretty much the same. The only real difference is if it looks a little different or if it has a heat sink or something like that, but should all be pretty much the same stuff. Typically want them to be on alternating slots here, and sometimes the slots are numbered, but it doesn't look like they are on this one. So you typically go with the first slot and the third slot. So just line these up and then just press them down firmly into their slot. And you should hear them click in. And keep this as well in case you need to send them back, because faulty RAM is a pretty common thing with computers as well. Alright, next we need to fit in the graphics card. And this should come with a couple of extra things. Let me just show you here what's in this box. So here you should have an installation disc for the drivers. Sometimes it includes power supplies. Here you have a DVI to VGA adapter, and you also have the quick start owner's card here. Be careful with this, just like the motherboard, this is another very fragile thing, so before you handle it, always make sure to ground yourself and touch metals. So we'll go ahead and use this slot here. Take these covers out, and most of these graphics cards use up 2
slots, so you'll need to take out 2 of these slots here. Done that, you flip the card over and slide it in place here. Always push this tab back before you slide the card in. Then when you put the card in, you should hear it snap in place, and then you can put the screws back in place over here. And go ahead and just set the hard drive in place along with the card reader that we have for this computer. So these will typically slide in from the front of the case. So over here, you should be able to push one of these out and then slide this in place. And these should be flush with the case if you ever buy a DVD drive or anything that goes here. And I'm actually going to route these cables towards the back of the case so I can manage the cables a lot better. So I'm actually going to move this down because the cables aren't very long, so I'm going to use the bottom one instead. So there is that. We need to flip the case over and get the hard drive in place. Here is the hard drive. This is the Western Digital Black 7200 RPM 1 terabyte hard drive. And the way you put these in is you get these slots that come with the case, and you basically just slide the hard drive here in place with the connectors going out. And on the side of the hard drive there's typically these little holes, and you just have to line up the hard drive with those. And then you just stick these plastic tabs inside those holes on the hard drive, and you're done. Hard drive in place, you just slide it in like that, and you get a bunch of these hard drive slots, so you can put as many hard drives as you want in here. But currently we just have the one hard drive. We might add other hard drives later on, since storage is kind of a big deal when you're taking pictures nowadays, especially with the newer cameras. So there's always room for expansion with this case. The last part is just routing cables and managing all these cables. The case looks like it has all the connectors down here for USB 3.0 and for the power reset and the hard drive LEDs. So we'll stick all of these through to the other side like that. And then basically the only cables that we need to route to the front are the ones to the motherboard. The other ones can just simply stay back here. And there is a very nice area where you can put all your cables that are not going to be used. The yellow ones that say PCIe, these are the ones for your graphics cards. So route those pretty much at the same hole where you put the 12-pin connector. And the other cable that you should be concerned with is this one here that has a CPU on it. This is for the processor. So this one typically you want to route up here. This is a SATA connector. SATA connectors can go down in the third hole. Now back here, the only things we need to worry about are power. So power to this hard drive. And we'll go ahead and use some power to power on these fans as well. Now the last thing we need to do is connect our hard drive, and for this I'm going to use one of these right angle cables here and plug it into the motherboard on the other side. Never mind, it looks like I'm gonna be using a straight cable instead. The straight cables plug into the bottom here. You might be able to see the cable. It's right there, that little white dot. And I'm routing the cable towards the back, so I can use this cable and plug it in to this hard drive here. And I'm going to use this to hold the cable and then route it down here as well, just so there's a bit better cable management. And then that can be plugged right there. Looks like we need some Molex cables as well. So these are called Molex cables, the old power cables. And it looks like these need to be used to power this card reader. Alright, so there is that. I'm also going to set one extra SATA cable in place, just in case the hard drive needs to be upgraded later on. I'm just going to stick that in with the hard drives over here. And then at this point we can put the back cover back on, because we should be done with everything in the back. Now back to the inside here, we just need to plug some cables in. You will want to start out with your USB ports. You need to push the cables back through. Here we'll plug in this SATA connector. And then basically the other important ones are the LEDs, which can be found right here, and these are typically the small wires, and you just need to get the hard drive LED right here. Power LED goes up here. And you need to make sure you connect the right ones, because if you don't connect the right pins, your computer probably won't even turn on. So keep that in mind. And then power switch, which goes right here. And the reset button, the reset switch. Additionally, it looks like we have a audio cable, HD audio cable right here. And it looks like we only have one USB 3.0 port, so we'll have to trade off and see which one we want to use, either the one on the case or the one on the external. That is it for this video and the build log on this computer here. Again, if you're interested in following this build log and building a computer with the exact same parts, all the parts are going to be listed down in the video's description, so you can go and purchase those.
If you learned something new, if you found this video informative or helpful in any way, please remember to like, comment, favorite, or share the video. Consider subscribing as well for more videos related to computer support, computer services, computer tips and tricks, and that kind of stuff. But anyways, as always, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.